start remote broadcast, but I'll talk to you that. It's 10 o'clock. So what does that mean? Boys and girls, it's Howdy Doody. No, it's the Startup Show. This is John Wren, the longtime fan of media, starting with Howdy Doody. Really, I remember sitting in the radio, in front of the radio, listening to Saturday morning radio shows before there was any TV. Can you imagine that? The Startup Show is on here each week, Friday, 10 a.m. Mountain Time for a half hour or so. It's from the world headquarters of the Small Business Chamber of Commerce, Inc. We're a Colorado corporation, but our hopes are worldwide. We'd like to help the world become revitalized, dynamicized. We're not as vital and dynamic of society as we used to be, and I think there are good reasons for that. We'll explore some of them here on this show. The Small Business Chamber of Commerce cooperates with local chambers to try to help them provide more real help to people who really want to start a new business. The number of businesses starting has dropped ever since I started crying the warning back in 1994. I saw it coming, wrote my little book. I've trickled out a few copies. 5280 magazine says we've infused Denver with an entrepreneurial spirit, but that needs to happen with the rest of Colorado, with the rest of the country, with the rest of the world. And so we're trying to help in that effort. If we can develop something that goes viral and spreads, but not just online, and I'll talk about that in a minute, why not just online. But the Small Business Chamber of Commerce is our sponsor. I'm John Wren. I'm here with you each Friday to talk about startup. If you're starting a new career, a new project, a new campaign, or a new business, you are at the right place. If you're in Denver this afternoon at 2 o'clock, I'll be at Panera Bread, 13th and Grant, and we can talk face-to-face there. We'll talk a little bit about why that's so important, the face-to-face aspect, in just a few minutes. If you're not in Denver, listen carefully today, because we'd like to help you start a startup workshop in cooperation with your local chamber or other group. And I'll tell you why in just a minute. Now, what I've promised for today is to share just a little bit of the history of what we've been calling the Idea Cafe. At one time, it was the Idea Association. The Idea Cafe seemed to attract more people when cafes were new. I came right after I helped start one of the very first Socrates cafes in the country. I read Chris Phillips' book, Socrates Cafe, and a few of us started a group that's still going here in Denver. It's a philosophical discussion. We do that. If you just go to Denver Socrates Cafe, it'll come right up as far as the Thursday night group, or Colorado Socrates Cafe Society. It's a meetup.com group, Colorado Socrates Cafe Society. You can see the various Socrates cafes that are springing up across Colorado. And I'll be tonight at Panera Bread at 6 o'clock for the Socrates Cafe there, and then tomorrow at the University of Denver Academic Commons. The Anderson Academic Commons used to be called Penrose Library. I don't know if Penrose knows they've changed the name or not, but he funded the library. They've gutted it, remodeled it. It's a totally different place. It's phenomenal. The Anderson Academic Commons, and we meet there every Saturday night to talk about whatever's on our mind, not politics, not current topics, but what underlies those current topics is how we think in general about important topics, and that's what we talk about. We don't pre-announce the topic in advance because we don't want someone coming, loading up and just arguing some dead author's point of view. We want people to do their own thinking. Chris Phillips, the way he puts it is, we search for truth by our own lights. Now, I also search for truth in other ways, but if these two things don't converge, these other ways, and then I'm not understanding something fully. And it helps me drive my personal inquiry further. And, if a question is important and you pursue it long enough, you will find an answer. I really strongly believe that. Now, it may not come in this lifetime, but eventually we will find an answer if it is important enough to us. So it's a good way to wake up, get out of the rut, think about things from a little different perspective. And the reading comes, but really after the meeting, we discuss And then it's almost always I go to Google, look up something online, find a book, and then come to the next Socrates Cafe with my thinking informed by that reading, but I'm not arguing one philosopher's point of view. Otherwise, you have battling Aristotle's. What did they really say? Which bores everybody to tears. Well, we do these startup workshops. Idea Cafe is part of the Small Business Chamber of Commerce. I want to tell you the history of how this happened. I separated and eventually divorced and was doing the marketing for a small theater, and they wanted me to do a show on this little station. And I said, "No, just talking about what's coming up for us when we only have 5 or 6 productions a year, this is not going to be compelling TV. So why don't we do this? Let's have somebody on the show every week from the arts to talk about their perspective on the arts here in Denver. And then we'll also have a guest that talks about their business and talk about how they started." So that was what got me started in the thinking about startup in any kind of a formal way. I'd grown up in a family business. I'd seen my dad for 20 years grow a business from just him to 100 employees that he sold for a substantial price. And I was with him the whole way. We were 2 years old I was 2 years old when they moved here to Denver. And and every night at the dinner table was a little bit like a business seminar with Pop. He would tell us who he'd hired and who he'd fired and why and what was good and what was bad and the market economy and how prices work. And it was a great education in many, many ways. So with that background, and I started doing this TV show just as serendipity because somebody was really trying to sell us ads. And we said, well, no, how about if we do a show? And this is the show they took. I was on the radio, on TV for 6 months, and we had a good audience. I enjoyed doing it, but they just weren't closing on sales of advertising to fund the show. So we shut that down, and I became a radio program. And we started these little gatherings face-to-face as a way to promote the show. And eventually they took on a life of their own, the Idea Association and eventually the Idea Cafe. Idea because of a 4-step business creativity model that I developed when I was working with the Bell system. Inspiration, or identify the target, the starting point of some sort. What are we trying to do here? D is develop alternatives. Some people call that divergent thinking, green light thinking. E is evaluate the alternatives. Do some hard thinking, decide which one you're going to pick. Think fast, because A needs to come very quickly. Take action based on that informed process. And books on creativity are coming out now, boiled down to these same 4 steps. They have all kinds of creativity models, but really they all pretty much boil down to these 4 steps. And that's what we use at the Idea Cafe Startup Workshop here in Denver. We've experimented with different ways of growing that. We've got yet another one that we're going to be trying this afternoon. And I'd love you to come and join us this afternoon or next Friday or some Friday soon. The Idea Cafe, Capitol Hill is the one that I'm at every week. It's the Panera Bread, just a block from the Colorado State Capitol, right on the corner of 13th and Grant. It's 1350 Grant Street, Panera Bread, 2 to 3:30, which is a bad time except for who we're trying to help. We're trying to help the person that's starting a new career or thinking about starting a new career. Maybe they're not in the process yet, but starting a new career, a new project, a new campaign, or a new business. And what we have in common is startup. And we do 2 things. We share startup experience. We've all started something. We started school, started a romance, started whatever. But everybody shares a little bit of startup experience that they've had directly. And then we use a technique for trying to apply everybody's brains to particular situations. And we're changing the way that we do that starting this afternoon. And we're also changing the way that we start new meetings this afternoon. We're going to experiment with something and see how it works. And if it works, I'll have a job aid for starting a new group that I think is powerful, that I can email to you. So if you're interested in that, be sure to call me. Best time to reach me is not online. I don't know about you, but I'm flooded with emails now, and it's hard to separate the wheat from the chaff. If you're interested in starting one of these little startup workshops in cooperation with your local chamber or other group right there where you're at, I would love to talk with you. Don't just email me, give me a telephone call. And if you get my voice recorder, leave a complete message. It's absolutely confidential. You know, we say Small Business Chamber of Commerce, Inc. Yes, that's the form, but it's really just me. And it's been no money in, no money out. It's been a labor of love. And that may change here over the course of the next year, because I believe we're having a significant impact on people, and we want to share that more broadly. And 5280 Magazine has said that we've infused Denver with an entrepreneurial spirit. I don't want to take full credit for all the good stuff that goes on in Denver. And certainly there is good. I think it's mainly a function of people like to live here that are creative people. And it's such a wonderful place, although keep that secret. You know, it's too many people here already. But people here do think in a little bit different way. And, you know, Robert Kennedy said, some see tragic things and say, why? I see them and say, why not? Let's change things. And we need that capacity more than ever before. And we've fallen into this idea that we can analyze and, you know, come up with the correct solution. Scientific management. Remember when we used that term? It just occurred to me this week. They still do that with politics. I mean, scientific management went out long ago because what we found, they still do research into management and try to improve themselves. But to call any particular method of management scientific, I think would get you laughed out of the school of business. But they still do it in political science. Political science. And I think it's probably less scientific than anything else. So, well, I don't see that anybody has joined us. Maybe there are people watching that aren't showing up on the meter. But this is being recorded, and hopefully it gets passed along. I'll get better at doing these shows each week, I hope. We've still got a bit of time left, so I promised the history, and I promised some details about startup that I'm going to try to keep those promises to you. And as I was saying earlier, we had this TV, radio shows, getting together to promote the shows. And what we would do is have guests on. You'd hear them on the air, which we might start doing with this. We might have our guests as part of the hangout. And then in the afternoon, you meet them face to face in the Denver Idea Cafe or wherever it is. And that took on a life of its own, because what I noticed was that on the air, these people that had started something new would tell one story. And when we get face to face, they would tell a bit of a different story. And they'd say, well, let me tell you what really happened. I'm a real fan of Dr. Amar Bahidi. He is a professor of entrepreneurship. When I first knew him, he was at Harvard. He is incredible. He's done some research into how businesses actually start. He's sent his students for years out to talk to the founders of successful companies and gotten face to face and gone back and found the true story about how they actually got started. And he has the same problem that I do with people on the air. When they're in front of his class, invariably they'll say, now it's very important they do a lot of market research. You don't know if there's a need for your product or service until you do that market research. And it's very important that you then do a comprehensive, strategic, long-term plan, 5 years minimum. and work out month by month what you're going to do, how you're going to do it. That's a critical piece of this. And then you take that out and get other people's money to fund this 5-year plan where you show them how they're going to become multimillionaires. And they'll say this, in variations on this, not necessarily the multimillionaire part at the end, but a lot of them do. And Dr. Vahidi says that he'll ask them, well, is that how you started? And invariably they will say, well, no, but it would have been a lot better off if I would have. Really. So you did it one way, and instead of sharing with us how you did it, what really happened, because it did work for you, whatever you did, you share this sort of fairy tale about how businesses should start. And that's been done often enough and long enough that most of the academic enterprise that's supposedly been set up to help people become entrepreneurs is just snuffing out the entrepreneurial spirit in America. Everyone is on college campuses is saying those same things about market research, about business plans. That's what they have as business plan competition. So as a result, what's happened with startups? You would think that now that there are so many entrepreneurship programs across the country that startups would be flourishing, that we'd have more of them would survive, but that is not happening. There are fewer startups than ever before. It's a real problem. And this is starting to be noticed. I've been talking about it since 1994 because I could see it coming. And when I first started saying, along with Dr. Vahidi, that the kiss of death is a written business plan, that if there is that market research and careful strategic plan in place, it's almost a sure sign this business is going to fail. We couldn't get anybody to listen to us. Dr. Vahidi wrote what Inc. magazine called the most important book ever written about startup, that expressed this in a very systematic and academically understandable way. I never saw one bad review of the book. Maybe there's one out there. I never saw it. But the academicians ignored it. Now it's just being translated into an obscure foreign language because they see the need in their country for Dr. Vahidi's book. But still, in this country, I ask repeatedly people in the SBA, have you read Amar Vahidi's The Origin and Evolution of New Businesses? No, I haven't. Academicians, have you read it? No, I haven't read it. Or they'll say they're familiar with it, but you ask them, and you got to question if they really understood what he wrote. But what he based his book on were these research questions that his students asked face-to-face of founders of new businesses, successful businesses that had at one time been new, that these were the founders, they were there for the first sale. And it's absolutely the case that there is almost never a written formal business plan, the way that I was taught to do them in graduate business school. There's almost never that written formal document before the first sale in successful companies. And that's because that kind of planning, and if you're a large corporation, you have to operate that way. If you're in the military, you're moving masses of people and equipment, you have to operate that way. But a little tiny embryonic business, it is more like giving birth to a baby, and you have specialists in that, OBGYNs. And when the child gets older, you have a pediatrician. Now, as the child gets older, still things change. Eventually, athletes may have a doctor well-versed in sports medicine. What these colleges and universities across the country are doing is taking sports medicine and applying it to the baby in the womb, before it takes its first breath. And this idea that you have to do this careful kind of planning is absolute insanity. Because now there are good people that know this and they keep trying to express it. The most recent example of that, Lynn Schlesinger, president of Babson College, ranked #1 in teaching entrepreneurship, and Charlie Kiefer, who is all through Peter Senge's The Learning Organization. These are two experienced people wrote a book called Just Start. Harvard Business Review Press published it, and it just laid an egg. It never hit the bestseller list. What hits the bestseller list are these absurd books that are thick, complex. A little guy having an idea and looking at one of those, oh, my aching back, let me get back to work here. Let's see, where are those classified ads? I'm just going to go back. And in some ways, it's systematic. I believe large corporations in some ways encourage this kind of thinking because it minimizes their competition. So, and some of them are well-intentioned. They want to help startups, maybe so. But the ones that support the SBA, I really have questions about what their motivation is. The ones that support these entrepreneurship programs in colleges that are just killing. Of course, it's not just entrepreneurship that the academic world is killing poetry. There was a column in the Wall Street Journal a year ago, last April 1st, Poetry Day, April 1st, 2013, a column on how academic world is killing poetry in this country. It used to be newspapers would all run poetry. People had an affinity for it, and today it's universally hated because of the way it's taught in colleges and universities. This academic approach to poetry is killing poetry. Well, the academic approach to entrepreneurship is killing entrepreneurship. And that's the reason for these little groups being so important. Now, there are a lot of things online like this. This is a half hour, and it is no substitute for you and I or you and somebody getting together face to face. And if there's not a format or structure to that meeting, it's very likely to turn into a bull session, complaints, you leave depressed. But if there is the proper structure in place, you get some good information, you get some inspiration, and there is something about being face to face with other people that just clears our head. We feel better after we get together with a healthy group. And I do not believe you have to have a trained professional to lead that group. I'm pretty good at leading the groups. If I can do it, anybody can do it. And I'm taking what I've learned about leading groups. I've spent at least 10,000 hours leading groups over the last 20 years or so. And if I can do it, anybody can. But there's some little tricks to the trade that I'm trying to share the best way that I can. I've got a sheet that we're going to test this afternoon. We'll see if it gets a group off the ground. We're taking a group that we've already established, and we're going to kind of rebirth the group this afternoon. So if you can join us for that, we'd love to have you. Be at Panera Bread, 13th and Grant. It's 1330 Grant, just a block away from the Colorado State Capitol. It's from 2 to 3:30 this afternoon. We're going to use a job aid that I've developed and will make available for anybody that wants to start a new group, really of any kind. And I'll tell you more about that in detail after we see how the test goes this afternoon. Now, don't let me distract you. You may already be in the throes of startup. If you're in pursuit of your first sale, if you have your first sale and you're trying to grow, then you don't want to let me or anyone else get in the way of that. And the worst offenders sometimes are all these wonderful programs that are out there to supposedly give help. And if you actually look at the real effect of it, I've got real concerns about so many people that are either thinking about starting a new business or in the throes of startup. It's even worse, getting consumed with these networking groups. That has become so popular, and everybody goes to these, passes business cards, are kind of an excuse for drinking, eating too much. You leave maybe with a pocket full of cards, but I see people year after year after year that sort of devote themselves to those things and really never get anything done. Yeah, I am much more of a believer in turn off my phone. I'm sorry if that's you calling. I just can't take your call right now. Maybe somebody calling to be on the air. I don't have that set up yet, but if you're in the throes of startup, you need to take care of business. And these networking groups, people get consumed with them. It sort of feels like you're working. You know, you go to one in the morning for breakfast, you go to one, some sort of a talk at lunch, you go to one in the evening, and it feels like you're working. I call it business by tea party. I think there have been some real positive influences of more and more women in the workforce, but this is one of the negative things. I think women kind of operate like this, whereas men, you know, make a list, make phone calls, set appointments, go out and close a sale. I mean, it's the difference between hunting and farming, and really not even farming, between hunting and, you know, providing help for the farmer. It's that thinking of the woman has been very, very helpful in a lot of realms, a lot of parts of life. But you know what? Just because it's feminine doesn't mean it's right. I went to a weekend workshop on the feminine aspects of spirituality, and this woman, and I said, well, so you're pretty much saying if it's feminine, it's good, and if it's masculine, it's bad? Is that what you're, well, no, I'm not saying. Okay, well, help me understand how you're, well, that was what was being expressed. And I don't want to suppress the positive aspects of feminism, but there's also negative aspects. And I think this networking, they are directly accountable for that. I believe that they encourage it, and it's really a faint image of what actually has worked in the past for women. Women have been much better at gathering together with other women, providing support and help for each other. And that's totally different than what happens at networking. The networking group is a counterfeit of that experience. And, you know, women definitely have been the thing that have driven organized religion for. Now, some people will say, oh, organized religion's done terrible things. Well, this spirituality is either real or it's not. If it's real, it's like fire. And there's been a long tradition of how do we work with this fire? It doesn't just burn us up. And women have been the carriers of that. Without women, I'm not sure men would have gone forward with that at all. And there are things inside of organized religion that look like networking, but if you look deeper, they're really not. And so anyway, this is, you know, way above my pay grade. Probably wasted your time listening. I may be way off base about that stuff, but I do know about startup. I've seen people do it. I've started things myself. And I know that it starts more like what Lynn and Charlie write about in Just Start than anything else. And it's a tragedy that that book hasn't started selling it. Although, you know what? Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations, probably the #1 book on economics. Do you know, for the first 8 years, it sort of did what Just Start has done. So they're only a couple of years into it. I'm hoping that eventually it catches fire. Give it a try. Amazon, Just Start, it'll come right up for you. Now, I also have a little book. It's called Daring Mighty Things, the simplest way to start your first or next new business. It's very rough and ready. I need to make a fully revised second, third edition. But I hesitate to do that. I don't want it to be too slick until I have other building stones in place. At least that's my excuse, the reasons I tell myself to justify probably what's not in anybody's interest. But it's on Amazon, and if you'll download it for 99 cents, if you don't find it helpful, I'll give you $1 back. How's that? Come to an Idea Cafe startup workshop. I'll give you $1 back if you bought the little book and did not find it helpful. But Daring Mighty Things, it's 4 phases to start up. First, you have to decide, do you want to start something? Then you have to prepare. And I think the best preparation is a liberal arts education, if you can do that. Not everybody can. But this idea that those are the burger flippers is outrageous. If you look at the actual high performers in this country, they've had a liberal arts education. I think it's an oppressive thing to discourage people from getting what's always been considered a good education. And these counterfeits that are, but at any rate, you prepare for it. And once you have a clear idea of what you want to do, this is what I'm going to do, these are the next 2 or 3 things, you're started. And then day after day, you get up, what do I want to do? You adjust for previous day's results. What can I do today to advance the ball? You go out and do them. You don't sit and write a business plan. You don't sit and do research. You go after it. And then once you've started, you grow your business. And I think one of the best ways to grow is to get a good assistant. And the Assistant 2 position by Victor Phillips is a classic. It's still available as a used book on Amazon. Victor Phillips, the Assistant 2 position. And this is a half hour. I'm going to stop now. I could go on, but some of you have already tuned out. I'll let you know how it goes this afternoon. This show is a work in process. It will be evolving. I may be getting some production help and some other help to try to make these things a little bit more palatable. But it's kind of a heart-to-heart talk today. I'd love to hear back from you. JohnWren.com is my website, or smallbizchamber.org is the Small Business Chamber's website. We've got a Facebook page. If you go to the Facebook page, post an introduction of yourself, your business. I'll promote it into the main news feed. Although Facebook's making that harder, so I now have to copy and paste, but I can still do it. So I'll promote it into the main news feed if you'll paste there. Some people don't want you to do that. I want you to do that on our Facebook page. Or call me Monday or Tuesday if you want to start a group, 303-861-1447. But remember, this is John Wren signing off with these important words. Remember, this life is very, very short. So let's go get started. Thanks for watching.